Hello, welcome back to the channel. It's me, Emmy the Cat Lady, and you join me here in Nuka World. We're just outside the Safari Adventure to talk about the ecology here, so should be able to get all this done in one video. But yeah, we've got the park map here, so just a bit of background for Nuka World. So it's located to the west of Boston, but it is still within Massachusetts. And it's a theme park that's large enough to actually require its own town for employees to live in. So if you look at the map, this is all the kind of park area. But we do also have Bradburton over here, which is a little town basically where people that worked here could live. Which is an interesting choice. And there was no direct hits to this area specifically from the nukes, but it's close enough to the major detonations that happened around Boston to have suffered damage essentially, and the fallout has definitely spread this far. But there's a number of other factors that impacted the park just before and after the bombs fell. So one of the first ones is that John Caleb Bradburton's focus on staying alive forever meant that he diverted a lot of funding to this agreement that he had with the government and with the US military to get into what's called the LEAP-X program and military contracts, where he allowed his chemists to work on developing chemical weapons and things essentially for the government. So because of that, it meant that a lot of kind of health and safety stuff for both customers and employees was kind of ignored and not properly taken care of, and that led to some issues for employees and customers. The space-themed section, the name has just completely escaped me, Galactic Zone, has military-grade robots that weren't properly controlled and posed a risk to people. At this Safari Adventure, where we just kind of came out of, there was definitely some questionable scientific practices going on, including the cloning machine. And at the bottling plant, which is just across there is a river of quantum, which is full of the radioactive strontium-90 isotope, which was used as both a soda flavour and a chemical weapon, an explosive one. So listen, everything is chemicals, everything is made of chemicals, all matter is essentially made of chemicals. And just because a specific chemical has an industrial application, it doesn't mean that it can also be a safe food additive. But strontium-90 is not one of those things. And I say, if you remember a video that I posted fairly recently from Fallout 3 at the Nuka-Cola plant there, where we learned about the deaths from the taste testing of quantum and the acceptable side effects and the fruit and cheese apology baskets. So, you know, quantum really not a great thing, and we will get into some of the problems that has been causing later on. But in terms of the geology of the land here, it's pretty much the same as what we see in the Commonwealth. You know, there is some kind of mountains in the distance and things. We have got, you know, trees and bushes and things like that. There's, you know, plenty of land. There is rainfall here, so it's a fairly kind of temperate region, just like what we see over in the Commonwealth. There's not really a huge amount of difference. There is some plant life here. The park, most of the park is kind of manufactured in a way, especially inside the actual park zones, because that's just what happens at these places. You know, they want to make sure the place looks nice, and they can use various decorations to hide the behind the scenes stuff so that you don't ruin any of the magic, you know, that kind of thing. So decorative plants and things would have been placed everywhere, especially in Safari Adventure Zone. As you can probably see from here, we do have an awful lot, because you're wanting to give it a more, you know, we're in the wild with all these animals kind of a theme. So, you know, there's even tree houses and all that kind of stuff. Because that's what, you know, if you're designing a zoo park, that's one of the things that you're going to do. So it does kind of make sense in that regard. But we do also have, you know, sort of, there's fake mountains. There's Fizz Top Mountain ahead there. It's obviously not a real one. A lot of these things have been kind of manufactured as well. And none of this is a big surprise because this place is specifically a reference to Disney World and other kind of major theme parks, mainly the Disney ones though. We are off the coast, so there's no ocean or sea presence here, but there is a river that kind of runs down the centre of the map. As we can see here, there's obviously bridges that go across it, so we do have, you know, fresh water running down, but pretty sure it is radioactive, and it does also mean we do have some of our Marlurk friends, as we can see over there. The World of Refreshment does have some extra spicy water. As mentioned, it's got quantum in it, which means it's got radioactive strontium-90 in it. And that means that the Nuka are back with terrifying new kinds, because these things evolve like bloody Pokemon. And the quantum is probably also responsible for the fever blossom plant, so there's a good example here. So we've got this like kind of glowing blue flower. That's one of, well, it's basically the only new plant that's here, because that lovely blue glow does tend to indicate that it's involved with Nuka-Cola Quantum. So we do have some changes to the environment because of, again, some of the stuff that has been going on here, and especially given that the place is fairly neglected. It's been kind of abandoned for quite a long time, even before the bombs actually fell, because John Caleb Bradburton was far more interested in living forever than he was about, you know, looking after his park and the legacy that he is leaving behind. So that does make things a wee bit more interesting. And in terms of food and things, just like Far Harbour, we have got a bunch of new creatures that have been added alongside some of the more familiar ones from the Commonwealth. So as always for these, I have put together a nice big chart, which I actually have a lot of fun making those. It's you know, it's really, really good. So just to look at some of the examples of the creatures that have been added by this DLC. Some of them, most of them you do find in Safari Adventure, like the gator claws are here, and you can find Yalguai here, the bears, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so we'll get over to my chart in Obsidian and we'll go through what the food chain looks like in this place compared to what we've seen in the main part of the Commonwealth in the base game. So I'm just going to switch windows over and I'll be with you shortly. Okie dokie, here we go. So this is the chart that I've created and put together based on the new creatures and the old creatures that we find in Nuka World. So down at the bottom, as always, we've got our primary producers, the plants. So I've just put grass there and carrots and corn, but you can grow most of the crops. They're all pretty much the same. And then we've got the fever blossom, the new flower that exists. And we've got a few kind of scavengers onto the list, as well as a couple of new herbivores to look at here. So the scavengers I've kind of put over here. So they're the ones that eat pretty much anything that they can find that's edible, as well as helping break down dead things. So we've got the cave crickets and we've got the ants. There are different varieties of the ants, including the flying ones, but they're all pretty much basically the same thing. The cave crickets and the rad rats. So these are different from the mole rats, because rad rats are based on brown rats and they are omnivores. They'll eat just about anything and you can feed them just about anything. Not kind of unsurprising, given that we're at a theme park, where there's, hundreds of people, and at theme parks there's a lot of food gets thrown away, there's a lot of food gets dropped on the ground, all that kind of thing. There's going to be bins of rubbish everywhere and a lot of food waste. So it's quite well known that in these places you are going to have scavenging creatures like ants and mice and rats and things moving in to take advantage of that. Even the cave crickets do that. And Disneyland has kind of famously had, that they have a bunch of cats there that keep the rodent populations down, and they kind of roam the park after hours and all that kind of thing. So that's our kind of scavengers. And then if we come to our herbivores, so we've got the mole rats, which we know before, they tend to live underground and they eat roots and things of various plants, and they do pop up occasionally in Nuka World. We've got our two new ruminants. So ruminants, if you remember, are large herbivores that have a 4-chambered stomach, which ferments all the cellulose and all the fibre and the grasses and the food that they eat. And they're characterised by ruminating, which means that they basically chew the cud, so they regurgitate some of their food, chew it again, and then swallow it. And that's kind of part of how they work. So Brahmin, or cattle, come under that category, goats and sheep, as well as deer, and even things like giraffes and things actually come under that category as well. So we've got the gazelles, which are this area's radstags, essentially. Again, gazelles are kind of in the same family as other deer. And so they've acquired the 2 heads and the 2 extra front legs and things like that. But otherwise they fill the same ecological niche as the radstags. They tend not to be aggressive right enough, whereas sometimes the radstags are, but they are found all over the place. And then you've got the Bramuluf, which are based on buffalo, and they fill the same ecological niche as the Brahmin do, as cattle do. They can be more aggressive. Again, the Brahmin can be a bit like that as well. Not a big surprise, but on the whole, they are, they're herbivores. They're not going to be going around eating people. And then one species that you might be surprised to see is in the same category as them, which is our gorillas or ghoulrillas. So the gorillas that stayed in the primate house at the zoo park became ghouls. But despite gorillas being, large animals that have been known to be aggressive to people and can be dangerous, they're herbivores. They're vegetarian. They don't eat meat. They don't kill for food. They eat plants. They eat fruit. Occasionally they'll eat insects and things like that, but on the whole, it's plant material and fruit that is their main diet. So they're not apex predators because they're not predators, but they do still have the potential to be dangerous because they are large and they will defend themselves and will defend their territory, and they are big and strong enough to stand against a human quite easily. But they're not going to be killing anything for food because that's not what they eat. So that's why gorillas are down here. It would be easy to assume that they belong up here with the bears and things like that, but because they are vegetarian, they're not going to be attacking people for the sake of food. They're going to be attacking because they have to defend themselves or defend their home, which is a little bit different. And then we've got our kind of primary predators, so the smaller kind of predators that will eat some of these animals. We do have cats. Again, with the cats in this game, I'm not entirely sure what they would be able to catch and eat, given that, the rats here are the same size as them and most other things are bigger than them, because cats are still, say, the same size as ordinary cats. But they could also all be synths. That's a possibility that I'm not discounting, but they do exist. They probably will find some small things to eat. And then the bloodworms, which are, again, they've grown much larger than their pre-war counterparts, and they are ambush predators. They sort of burrow underground and jump up. to catch their prey, and they are insanely aggressive. So they have probably quite successful in terms of what they're killing and eating. And then we'll get up to the next level. We've got our dogs as well. So we do have the wild mongrels, but we do also have some tame domesticated dogs present in Nuka World, and they'll be eating all the kind of smaller animals as well. And probably it's at least the domesticated ones will be living alongside humans, so they'll be eating what they get from that. And then we got up to the next level, so we've got our Mirelurks, we've got our Nuka Lurks. They come up to the level of secondary predators, would be eating anything that's kind of smaller than them, essentially. And our ghouls, there's only really one non-feral ghoul present in Nuka World, and that's Oswald. All the other ghouls that you come across, and most of them are in Kiddie Kingdom, but they're all feral. Unfortunately, they have all kind of lost their minds a little bit, and they'll eat whatever they can get their hands on, but they can be a threat in large numbers. And then obviously our humans, who are going to be eating anything smaller than them, omnivores, so they will eat plant-based food as well. We do have cannibalism going on in various places, so we do have humans eating other humans. Again, not something that I would ever recommend, but it's happening. Super mutants have a presence in Nuka World, so they are becoming a bit more of a problem. The Yalguai, as I said, the bears, they are present in small numbers in Nuka World. Particularly, there's a couple in the Safari Adventure Zone, but I think you can find them out and about as well. And I say they're not really apex predators because they don't go out of their way to hunt other kind of predators in that sense, like humans and that kind of thing. So they are kind of near the top of the food chain, but they're not sitting at the very top because there is, unfortunately, things that are bigger and nastier than them. So our Deathclaw friends are here. They're very successful species, probably not intended when they were created that this is what would happen, but they are everywhere, and they are dangerous. They are apex predators. They are basically bigger and tougher than just about anything else that you're going to find in the Wasteland. So handle with care, but they do sit up here at the top of the food chain. They are joined by the gator claws, which are unique to this area. They're only found in the Safari Adventure, and there is a finite number of them in the game, because the idea is that when you go and clear that place out, you shut down the machine that's creating them, and thus no more are created. So again, ecologically, they kind of fit the same niche as the Deathclaws. They're not quite as tough as the Deathclaws. They're created using FEV and alligators' DNA. Their behaviour is very similar, although they do live in the water and like to be near the water. They're not quite as armour plated, they're not quite as tough, but they are still large, aggressive and dangerous, and potentially a threat, so it's a good idea to eliminate them anyway, but that's where they fit in. And then of course we've got the Nuka Queen. As far as I know, there's no Mirelurk Queens in Nuka World. There's just some of the normal Mirelurks, but we do have the Nuka Queen. And she is, as dangerous as you might expect. She's like the Mirelurk Queen, but she is bigger and more dangerous. And then I don't know where the pictures went. I maybe haven't put it in here. Hang on. There it is. Yeah, I wanted to bring this one in. So this is a cut creature. Let's just move it up to where it belongs with its friend. Here we go. So yep, this one was actually cut from the game, which is kind of sad in a way because I think it's really cool, and that is the Quantum Deathclaw. So basically looks like a glowing Deathclaw, but blue instead of green. So I'm assuming that you were supposed to maybe find one of these at the bottling plant, but it was unfortunately cut from the game, which makes me kind of sad. Yeah, because I like the new clerks and things. I mean, part of it probably is just that I really like the color. Uh, but I just think it makes them look really cool because everybody associates, green glow with radiation and all the rest of it. But I like the blue. I think it looks really, really cool, and the fact that we have this unique variation, and it kind of makes you wonder because if you imagine what would happen if you drank Nuka Cola Quantum every day. Would you end up glowing like this eventually? Like, and I think it just highlights the kind of corporate nonsense that was happening in the Fallout universe where, they could get people taste testing these drinks, which caused people to die. And then they're just like, oh, here's some fruit cheese basket. We're really sorry. And then they just keep doing it anyway. Yeah, it's kind of bonkers. But we could have had this, but we didn't get it. But I just really, really like it. The design. I think it would have been really cool to see in the game. But yeah, that's our Nuka World food chain in essence. So the base game has more creatures. We've got a few kind of old favourites mixed in with some new ones that are kind of unique to Nuka World. Again, I think that's really good because it does give you a bit of kind of variety to the game that, you've gone to a different place and some of these species, I mean, when the ants and the rad rats, they've been probably present in this theme park for hundreds of generations. They're going to be descended from the pre-war pests that make themselves at home in these theme parks, and it is something is to be expected for something like that because you've got like thousands of people attending these locations on a daily basis, especially during spring and summertime, the peak season, and the amount of food that goes around, the amount of food that's getting thrown away. It's an absolute haven for these creatures. So, especially because in a lot of them, people are often eating outdoors, people are walking around while eating. So it's just an absolute haven for them. But obviously, you don't really want your customers seeing that there's rats running about because that's quite off putting. Which is why Disney do have a whole colony of cats at Disneyland that keep the mice and the rats under control. And they kind of just run loose across the park when it's closed and keep the rodent populations at bay. So it's not a big surprise, but I think it's very interesting, and I do like to see the return of the Nuka-Lurks. I think it's really quite interesting. And they stand as a warning for drinking too much Nuka-Cola Quantum. It's probably not not that good for you, even with the fact that I think the sugar content in it's supposed to be absolutely insane as well. And excess sugar. Sugar is not the demon that people say it is, but too much sugar is definitely not healthy either. So it's probably not something that I would recommend in real life. But yeah, so that's pretty much it for the Wasteland Ecology series. There's not really any more add-ons that add anything in that regard. So that's the end of this series, which is awesome, but also kind of sad because I really enjoyed putting this together and assembling these charts with the food chain and working out where everything should sit based on their diet and based on the species that they come from and that kind of thing. So hopefully you guys have found it really interesting as well. It definitely seems like this has been one that's resonated with a lot of you. You seem to like it, which is really nice. And I'm excited to bring the next Science of Fallout series from next week. We are going into some psychology. So what I want to do is take a look at some of the vaults with the experiments and look at the kind of psychological context of the results. So not necessarily looking at what Vault-Tec were trying to study with these experiments, which I did cover in the kind of Vault-Tec series. It's more about looking at what actually happened why it might have happened that way, and how much of that is related to what Vault-Tec intended, and what kind of information, what kind of conclusions that we could potentially come to based off of the results of that, and looking at it in reference to the, psychology, and to, sort of actual psychology experiments that have been carried out in real life, that might tell us a bit more about this kind of thing. So it's going to be quite in depth, but I think it's going to be very, very interesting to look at. So hopefully you guys want to come back for that. Don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss a thing, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.